What I like about yoga is the fact that it doesn't deny the fact that we live in a material world. Far from it. It tries to work out what exactly is the nature of this material world. How is it made up? How can we systematize it? How can we understand its forces? How can we work with it skillfully rather than just being like bamboozled by what seems like total chaos, or on the other hand, trying to just deny the material world altogether? Yoga doesn't do that. It wants us to understand what's going on so that we can create harmony, create balance by, understanding it. So last time we talked about the fact that according to the yoga system and the Sankhya system, reality consists of these two aspects: the light of illuminating consciousness, Purusha, which pervades everything, and like the stuff of material nature, which is Prakriti. Now, how do we actually go from this abstract notion of like these two aspects to the teeming aliveness of the material world that we experience, of the plants and animals and objects and colors and textures and personalities, all the temperaments and qualities and characteristics that we experience in the world? Well, this evolution from the subtle to the concrete is driven by the catalysts in the form of three kind of forces or qualities of nature called the gunas. And this word guna actually means quality, but it can also mean rope. And so you could kind of think of it like everything in the world is made up of the interweaving of the three strands of nature. And basically everything that we encounter, everything that has a form or which you can name, whether it's visible or not, like this body or an atom or energy or the weather, or even and especially your mind, all of that is made up of the different combinations and permutations of these three forces, which are the gunas. So they kind of come together in different combinations to make the different materials that we experience. I'm speaking like materials and like personalities and kind of qualities, combinations, all the characteristics come from these different combinations. But also the gunas kind of drive all action as well. So everything that happens, everything that you do, and everything that happens in nature is driven by the gunas. Bhagavad Gita says it like this: all actions everywhere are done by the gunas of Prakriti. The being who's confused by egotism thinks, I am the doer. But one who knows the true nature of things, the two roles of guna and karma, O Mahabaho, mighty armed one, the one who understands this is not attached, having thought, the gunas are merely acting on the gunas. Okay, so I'll come back to that, like the kind of philosophical, usefulness of that particular quote a little bit later. But first of all, I'd like to look at what are these gunas? What are the three forces? How can we recognize them in the world? Because they're quite recognizable. And how can that actually help us to live better? Okay, so we have three gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas. And sattva, it's from the word sat, which is like reality, actually, which is derived from the verbal root as, which is to be. And so, you could think of it as beingness, or I like to think of it as realness. But also sattva is translated as lucidity or balance or harmony, or, luminosity. Sattva is a balancing force that harmonizes. It oversees, observes, and crucially reflects. So like your intelligence is a force of sattva. Your creativity, clarity, openness, harmony, like the way that you feel after a yoga class of both energized and relaxed, that's sattva. So it's kind of a clear and very pure state in nature of balance. Rajas comes from the verbal root ranj, which means to color, to redden. And you could think of it quite simply as action, momentum, or rather like the spark of passion, like that, the stimulating force that initiates change. This is the thing that gets everything going. It's activity, energy, excitement, passion, agitation, but also you can see that from this comes anxiety, egotism. The whirlings of the mind is like driven by rajas. But it's also the force for change. So if you want to make change in your life and like make a new and positive pattern, then rajas is what you need. Tamas is the third one, which comes from the word tamas, which means darkness. And so darkness, I like to think of it as inertia, and various commentators have translated it as in this way, which is basically, it's a passive force which sustains previous activity. So it's what keeps things going in the same way that it has been going up until that point. So it's the force of gravity, and tamas gives mass to objects. So we understand that the body and the mind are actually made of like similar kind of stuff, but the body has more tamas, and so it has more materiality to it. Whereas the mind and the intelligence is sattvic because it's quite pure. And then you've got rajas within you as well, because that's your energy, your get up and go, your digestive fire, your nervous system, the electrical impulses in your heart. That's your rajas. So we have these three forces which are always in every single thing in the world. The classical example is of the candle made of wax, and then the flame, and then the light. So you have wax, which has mass, it's inert, so that's tamas. And then you have the flame, which is burning and it's hot and it's changeable, which is rajas. And then you have the light, which is illuminating from this flame, and so that's sattva. And we have these qualities in all things, including in your mind. So like the dullness and the laziness and the kind of stuck in your waysness is tamas. And then the agitation and the anxiety and the overthinking of things is your rajas. And then the clarity of your mind and like the wisdom of being able to see things as they really are, that's sattva. And so with our yoga practice, we're tending to try to kind of sattvicize, so kind of like get more towards the sattvic state for ourselves, because clearly that's how you kind of see things clearly and you're more like peaceful and stuff like that. The physical āsana practice helps us to overcome the heaviness, the tamasic nature of the body. And it also helps to balance the rajasic overactive mind and the over-energetic kind of state. But that crucially does not mean that sattva is good and rajas and tamas are bad. No. We need all three of them. And yoga understands that nothing in the world is good or bad. These value judgments are things that we just project onto them, post factum. But, if you didn't have the material, if you didn't have an actual physical body, which is facilitated by tamas, then you wouldn't be able to move in the material world. If you didn't have the rajasic force, you wouldn't have the kind of momentum to get on your yoga mat in the morning. And if you didn't have tamas, which allows you to come back again and again and again, to keep going once you started your yoga practice, to get all the way towards the end instead of being distracted by random other stuff which is happening. So it's only when these three gunas, where one of them becomes overly predominant or where they just basically get out of balance, that's when they become a problem. Or not even necessarily a problem, it's just that when we can understand that we have a little bit more raja. For example, if you're trying to go to bed at night, you don't want to be very rajasic. When your mind is going and thinking about all the stuff you have to do, that's not appropriate. Tamas would be helpful when you're trying to go to bed at night. So we are trying to create balance. And what's good about the gunas is that they're always in motion. So there's a couple of like principles that apply to them, one of which is the law of alternation. So these three gunas are always in dynamic interaction. The three forces remain intertwined, but they affect each other in various ways. And the essence of the gunas is their interplay. We don't see just tamas or just rajas or just sattva. The whole thing is that they're dancing in between each other and always kind of fluctuating. The other kind of principle is that they have a kind of law of continuity, which means that even though they're dancing, they don't kind of completely change, minute by minute. They hold their particular nature for a certain period of time before once they come into dominance, before they change into the other one. So it kind of goes like this, that like you get yourself into a sattvic state, maybe by doing your practice, and then you're so chilled that maybe you get a bit too chilled and you're a bit too tamasic and you're lying in shavasana for a really long time, but you've got to go and start your day. So whoop, some rajas comes in and gets you going again. But then you get overexerted and oh my God, and too many things. And so then that kicks into sattva where you're like, okay, wait, I'm going to balance myself out. And then we go on the loop again, right? So we use our practice. We can understand, and this is what I love about it, we can understand that these gunas, the qualities of nature, are not like fixed and rigid things. And we can understand that change is possible. Change is possible between all of these three. And when we do our practice, in order to kind of cultivate balance here, it's not that we're reducing a problematic guna, we're transforming it into another one. When the rajas is purified, when the overactive rajasic kind of active state is purified, it turns into more sattvic creativity and vitality. And when the heaviness of tamas is purified, it turns into steadiness and reliability. So when you can see that as we can recognize these forces, we can see that they are something to work with, that, nature becomes a lot less mysterious in a way, on the one hand, because you can see that, oh, that's that kind of force at play. That's that force of play. You can even see it within your relationships of if something's feeling very changeable, if it's very harmonious, or if you're stuck in your old ways and you always just do the same old thing. So we can work with these gunas and balance them so that we can feel that we occupy a more kind of balanced place in the world. Now, that's the practical aspect of it. I'd like to come back a little bit to the more philosophical side, which may or may not be relevant to you, but I find it interesting, so I'll say a little bit about it. Going back to this quote that I read before from the Gita, the gunas are merely acting on the gunas. So this seems like, what do you mean the gunas are acting on the gunas? I'm doing the thing. And it says, no, the being who's confused by egotism thinks I am the doer. So the Gita reminds us that it's not you, the truest you, that is active in the world, that is doing the activities. It's actually the forces of nature kind of playing themselves out through you. And you are there to kind of just let them be in their action, let them play out their role. Which on the one hand can sometimes seem a little bit confusing, because where is your agency then? But on the other hand, for me, it can be very comforting to see where things have come from. So for example, I have quite a kind of fiery temperament sometimes, like I'm a Sagittarius and, I've got fire in me. And when it's very hot, I find that I get angry and overstimulated quite easily. Like I can kind of get overexcited. And so for me, it's helpful to kind of recognize that and know that this is acting, that force is acting through me. But rather than just go like, oh, I hate myself, like I'm such an angry person, I can understand that my nature, which has a bunch of rajas in it, is kind of combining with the nature of the weather and the climate to create a situation. And when I understand that, then I can actually mitigate one thing or the other. You know, I can make sure I keep cool, I can practice more pranayama, you know, and I can work with that in quite a skillful manner. And it becomes less personal. You know, you can then practice, of course, non-attachment, which allows you to find peace, ultimately. So this is something that we can experience in the world. But more than that, you know, at the end of the day, even though yoga understands that the material world is real, many of the schools have the aim of transcending that material world. You know, liberation, of course. Bhagavad Gita chapter 14, when somebody with a body goes beyond these three gunas, which rise up together from and through the body, they attain the nectar of immortality, and they're freed from birth, death, old age, and suffering. Would you want to do that? Would you want to get beyond this human life? It depends on your goal. You know, like as we've discussed, it can make your human life more harmonious, or it can help you to go beyond it. Now, how do you do that? We talked about balancing, but the thing is that because these three gunas, they're always in this interplay, this dance, when you bring them into a state of perfect balance, then they return to a state of pure potential. Because that's how nature evolves in the first place, that it goes from pure potential, from pure consciousness into the material world through this dance. So if you actually bring things back into balance, into equilibrium, then you come closer to Purusha, to this infinite light of pure eternal awareness. And so that might be your goal. But know that as with all of the yoga system, we go through the world to get past it. In the Yoga Sutra chapter 2, Patanjali says, that which is knowable has the nature of illumination, activity, and inertia. He uses slightly different words, prakasha, kriya, and sthiti, which are just from a different tradition, but they are synonymous with sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the knowable consists of the senses and the elements, and it exists for the purpose of providing liberation or experience for the Purusha. So the knowable world, the material world, is not there for no reason. It's there to help you go to realize what's beyond it. So the more you understand the way that the world works, the more you can understand that you can transcend the world if you wish to. Or at best, live a good life. Okay, until next time. Om Shanti.